For today's video, I've gotten my hands on one of the best new vehicles for 2022. The all-new Ford Maverick absolutely should be on your shopping list because this is the least expensive pickup truck in America, it's the least expensive hybrid in America, and even if you object to calling this a pickup truck and you think this is a crossover with an open bed in the back, it's the least expensive crossover in America. And again, this should absolutely be on your shopping list. To help me explain why, I have our new presenter for Alex and Autos here, Brian Ross Kelly. So Brian, what do you think about the new Maverick? Do you think this is the best new vehicle on sale in America today?
I think it might be. Let's take a closer look. So when it comes to the front end design, I think Ford did an excellent job of giving it a tough Tonka truck look. It's very squared off and it has standard LED headlights that look really good, but if you get the Lariat trim, you get a nicer accent on the top that I think adds a bit of extra flair.
I love the standard LED headlights, but one weird touch, even on the top end trim, the turn signals are incandescent. So Brian, as a city dweller, I think you can appreciate this. Whenever I read a review of this vehicle, one of the first lines often is, it's the first truly compact pickup truck in a while in America. But it's not really as compact as some people might think. Would this fit in a compact mall parking space?
I think this truck might be able to fit, but what really constitutes a compact spot, Alex?
Apparently, the definition of a compact parking spot in America is 16 feet long, and this is a little bit longer than 16 feet at just under 200 inches long. So if you think a Dodge Durango is a compact vehicle belonging in a compact parking spot, then sure, this will fit just fine, because in terms of width and length, this is closer to a Dodge Durango than it is to the Ford Escape that it's based on. Now let's talk about why the Maverick is the size that it is.
Right, Alex? So Ford wanted to make sure that this had the proper truck look, and therefore they gave it the proportions of a truck. You've got a long hood, a cab that has enough room for people in the back seat, and a bed that's about 4 feet, or just over 4 feet long.
Yep, and they wanted to give this sort of like the practicality of a compact crossover. So Ford Escape-like room, sort of, depending on the model you're looking at on the inside. The hybrid model, which I'm driving today, does have a little bit less legroom, and then of course a practical bed in the back. And that really just defined the size of the truck. In order to have the hood, the body here, and then a bed in the back that is usable for something, you end up right around 200 inches long. Basically the same formula that we find in the Hyundai Santa Cruz, but that's a little bit smaller, I think, right? It's like a little bit shorter?
A little bit shorter, slightly wider. The proportions of that truck are definitely going to be different than this. So if you put this next to a Santa Cruz, you're going to be wondering which one is the real truck here.
So which do you think is prettier, this or the Santa Cruz? The Santa Cruz is definitely crossover with a bed, and this is a little bit different.
Yeah, I think the Maverick has, once I've seen it in person at least, it's got a more cartoonish look to it, perhaps even a reverse caricature of an F-150, which I think truck buyers are really going to look for.
Yeah, I think that's the part that I kind of like about it, is that it's like that little cartoon truck. I'm told that like most pickup truck ads, I focus a little bit too much on 4x8 sheets of things. How often do you find yourself buying a 4x8 sheet of plywood or drywall?
Not that often, Alex.
Really?
For me personally, I do a lot of mountain biking, and I like to shoot the hooch, as we call it in Atlanta, which means...
What is that? I've never heard of this.
Floating down the river in tubes, the Chattahoochee River.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
shoot the hooch.
It's a thing.
But, you know, you would be able...
Would your inner tube fit in there?
Yeah, it would. You could probably fit quite a few, actually, and that's exactly why, me personally, I would want a truck like this. I don't want to put that stuff inside the back of my crossover. I want that to be out in the exposed elements.
Should you need to do 4x8 sheet goods, this will actually do it according to Ford, and here's how. So the tailgate here has your regular down position, and as you noted, this is not damped. So how do you feel about not damped tailgate? It is only $20,000 starting.
For the price, I'm not too upset about it.
Okay, so you can put it in that position, or you can relatch that up there, and now the edge is at the same height as the wheel wells, and you could put a 4x8 sheet of something from on top of the wheel wells all the way back here, because between the wheel wells it's not 4 feet wide, but on top it is just barely. The highest position for the bed is achieved by having the cable anchor up here and then wrapping the cable around this mid post. It actually is designed to sit in this position, and at this point the top of the tailgate here is the same height as a 2x4 resting in this little notch here. So you put a 2x4 in there, put your items on top of there, all the way to here, you have a second tier of storage.
And with the tailgate being allowed to sit up in this higher position, if you were to use a, say, paddle board and you wanted to hang that out the rear end, this tailgate would make it a lot easier to keep it secured.
Yep, or you could always just close the tailgate. And one thing that I found surprising is that Ford was smart enough to actually allow the tailgate to close even when the cable's in this position, so it doesn't actually cause any pinching or anything. Back on the subject of those longer sheets of plywood, etc., a really nice touch is that Ford puts tie downs on the tailgate. And if you've ever tried to carry a longer item like this in a regular truck, sometimes you have problems figuring out where you can actually strap things down to keep them in the bed. Ford has solved that with those little tie downs. When Ford announced that the Maverick was coming, the existence of this 2.5-liter, 4-cylinder, 191 horsepower hybrid wasn't exactly a surprise, because this is the same hybrid system that we find in the Ford Escape. What was a surprise is that Ford decided to make this hybrid system the standard engine in the Maverick, rather than a 1.5-liter turbo or some other engine borrowed from an inexpensive crossover in their lineup. What's a little bit different between this hybrid system and the Escape's hybrid system is that you cannot get the Maverick with the hybrid and all-wheel drive, although this hybrid system is the standard engine in every trim level. Ford does not give their hybrid systems official torque figures, but I expect this is somewhere around 220 pound-feet. At 37 miles per gallon combined, this is just about as efficient as the average compact hybrid crossover. Really, only something like the RAV4 hybrid will get slightly better fuel economy than this, but in real-world driving, this and the RAV4 hybrid are actually awfully close. And remember, this is about the same size as a Dodge Durango. A lot of you have asked me about the feasibility of putting the Escape's all-wheel drive system on this hybrid, because, again, in the Escape, you can get hybrid and all-wheel drive together. I don't really see a mechanical reason why they couldn't do that in this vehicle. The battery is not, as some people have assumed, in the way of the drive shaft in the vehicle. It's actually on the passenger side, just under the body. Really, the only thing in the way of the drive shaft in this vehicle is an exhaust heat recovery device, and that could probably be easily relocated. So I suspect that Ford might, at some point in the future, put an all-wheel drive system on this hybrid if there's enough customer demand.
Now, if you want all-wheel drive in your Maverick today, you can upgrade to the 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder. It has 250 horsepower, 277 pounds-feet of torque, and has combined 25 miles per gallon. Now, it also comes with the same 1,500 pounds of payload capacity back there in the bed, as well as the 2,000-pound towing capacity. However, because it has all-wheel drive, you do have the option of a 4K towing package. That boosts the towing number up to 4,000 pounds.
As always, front seat comfort is going to vary a little bit based on your size and body shape. I found the front seats to be fairly comfortable, but I do think the seat bottom cushion is a little bit shorter than I'd like. How is it for you? You're what, 5'9"?
5'9", you know, on my bios.
So are we saying 5'8"?
5'8.5", sure.
5'8.5", okay.
But no, for me at that height, I think I've got enough support under my knees for the most part. I do wish there was more adjustability to the tilt of the seat bottom.
Yeah, seat bottom cushion doesn't tilt on that side.
It does not tilt.
And I have a manual seat on my side, so no power seat is available on the passenger side of any Maverick. If you want that, you're gonna have to step up to something else.
So I've got the front passenger seat moved all the way back in its tracks, and as you can probably tell, I'm pretty much without any legroom left. My knees are pushed out to the sides of the front seat, and my right knee especially is pinned against the door, so not ideal.
But how about if you sit behind me? This driver's seat is adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. Let's see how much legroom you have got going over there. According to the spec sheets, this should have about the same kind of legroom as you find in the average compact stand, but there is a little bit of a twist. Ford does tend to use a slightly different measurement standard than some other car companies, which causes their legroom figures to look a little bit bigger than they really are. But this actually is about the same as a RAV4 to me.
And it helps that they've carved out a little bit of space into the rear of the front seat, so you do have room for your knees to kind of poke in there a bit. But overall, I mean, in this position, I could make this work.
And if I were a nice guy, I could still drive the car and move my seat upright a little bit, but am I really that nice? I don't know.
So this Lariat trim also has a center armrest back here. Really nice and convenient if you want to rest your arm here. However, the cup holders are right where your forearms go, so your arms are not going to be sharing the space with a large drink.
One thing worth noting, the rear seat back does not fold flat. Even with the headrest off, it's actually not rubbing against that seat right there. Just doesn't go completely flat. But the seat bottom cushion goes up the same in the hybrid and the non-hybrid, and it locks into place. But it is a 100% fold-up design, even in the top-end trim, so no 60/40 cargo storage there.
Up top in the Maverick, we have a sunglass holder here, as well as the space for what would be moonroof controls. We do not have the moonroof equipped in this model. Our front seat belts have height adjustability with a decent range of motion here, which is nice. The seat headrests themselves are two-way adjustable on most models, but you can add the ability to have four-way, so they adjust fore and aft. Moving over to the door panels, we can see Ford's color choice is really front and center. We've got copper here, navy blue there, a silver somewhere in the middle. Looking forward from the passenger's perspective, you'll notice Ford went to great lengths to make the view a little bit more interesting. For example, you'll see the copper accents that you saw on the door panel surrounding the air vents, as well as this nice 3D origami pattern texture to the silver elements. I think that adds a nice bit of pop to it. The glove box is your typical bin style. It's perfectly sized for a mid-sized tablet or two to fit in there. The dashboard of the Maverick is refreshing in the fact that it's not a carbon copy of the Escape's interior. They went with a more truck-like look, and I really appreciate that. We've got this wide binnacle here that houses both a standard 8-inch touchscreen and a small storage cubby over here. The 8-inch infotainment is last generation software, Sync 3. It's a little laggy here and there, but is capacitive touch, so it's quick to respond to your inputs. Down here in the lower section of the dash, you'll find the engine start-stop button, as well as the switch for the rear sliding glass window, and then USB-C port and a USB-A, both for the wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which are both standard on all models. In typical Ford fashion, you'll find their rotary shifter right here. Below that, the electronic parking brake, and then the buttons to control the different drive modes, turning traction control on and off, as well as the brake hold feature on and off. We also have more storage options right here and here, and finally, the storage underneath your armrest, which is deep enough for whatever you might need, and it's pretty average for a crossover in this size category. On Lariat trims, you'll find the larger 6-inch LCD screen here in the instrument cluster, which is flanked by the speedometer on the right, as well as the hybrid power meter on the left. Unlike the dashboard, the steering wheel here is ripped straight out of a Ford Escape, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's leather wrapped and feels comfortable in the hands and has all the hard buttons for the controls you need. You do have the cruise control buttons over here on the left mixed with some volume controls, which is interesting. On the right, you have controls for the LCD screen in the center, as well as Bluetooth and phone controls.
Let's get this out on the road. The first thing you'll notice is 0 to 60 time is a little bit swifter than I thought.
Yeah, and it feels plenty powerful, and I know you mentioned that there's not too much of a difference between this 0 to 60 time and the actual 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder, which is of course supposed to be the more powerful model. And I noticed it myself. I feel like there's plenty of get up and go in this.
Yeah, this one's 7.6, and the 2-liter turbo that we were able to test at the launch event, mind you, that one wasn't here at home, 7.2 in that one, so pretty respectable for both. But again, no all-wheel drive in the hybrid, and I kind of miss it. What do you think?
Yeah, especially if you're going to be off-road. You know, you don't have to go crazy off-road with this, but if you are on the gravel path, you're going to notice the wheel slippage a little bit more on the hybrid.
You noticed that in my driveway, right?
I did notice it, yeah. And it's not, you know, it's not crazy or anything, you know, scary or anything, but
right.
You'll notice it. And
it does lead to that sort of like, can I go there and know that I'm going to be able to get out? Like in my driveway, there are places where, you know, you kind of slip when you're trying to move again. And that is disconcerting. So if you do live in an area with snow, ice, etc., you might really want the 2-liter turbo, or you might really want to email Ford now and beg for a hybrid all-wheel drive.
Now, when you're trying to stop the Maverick, I think the 135 feet it takes is a little bit long for, you know, your Escape type crossover that this is based on, but for a truck, a mid-sized truck especially, that's coming up a little bit shorter too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's, depending on the truck, yeah, it's pretty right in there. I mean, a Ridgeline, a Ranger, etc., they're going to be right around that 135 feet as well, but I mean, there's no denying physics. This is bigger than an Escape or a RAV4, and it has 225 with tires on this hybrid model. It's how we get to the high fuel economy. But, you know, it definitely could be improved, I would say, if you put grippier tires in the vehicle, wider tires, but that's going to defeat the mission of the hybrid in a way.
Exactly, and it might sacrifice the comfort that I am experiencing on the road right now. I mean, we're driving along, and I feel like almost floating. You know, we're floating along, and nothing out of the ordinary to experience here. I feel like it's very comfortable.
Feels very just like a mid-size, I'd say mid-size crossover. It drives really like a Blazer, an Edge, a Santa Fe, something along those lines. And actually, I think handling is pretty good. You'll notice on the top of your screen there that all these scores are as compared to the average compact crossover, because according to Ford and, strangely enough, Hyundai, who also has a competitive vehicle in this segment, they think that these trucks are going to be purchased by someone that's interested in an Escape or a RAV4 or a CR-V or something like that, but they want the practicality of that open bed in the rear view.
Like I said earlier, you know, it's not going to fit in every compact spot you find in the city like where I live, but you are going to be able to get it around the turns through the sort of narrower streets. You're going to be able to maneuver it around with a lot more finesse than you would find in those larger trucks and larger crossovers.
And on like narrow roads like this definitely feels smaller than a mid-sized truck, even though dimensionally it's not that much smaller. I think it's because we're actually sitting closer to the ground. Since this is a unibody truck, of course, there's no frame between us and the ground, so this definitely has that crossover-like experience that so many new car shoppers seem to be after.
When compared to the Santa Cruz, this has, I think, a little bit better visibility as well. I'm seeing a lot of the road ahead. There's a lot of glass, a lot of greenhouse. It's very much an upright windshield. No problems there, in my opinion, from where I'm sitting.
It's all that mini truck shaping there, you know? Out on a gravel road like the one that we're on here, I think the ride quality is pretty good. What do you think?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I'm feeling some imperfections, but nothing crazy and nothing, I'm not jostling around. I feel like it's quite comfortable.
What surprised me most is that this really feels more like an Escape, more like a crossover than a Ranger or a Tacoma or something like that.
And I think that's true to the mission of the car. So
Yeah.
I mean, they hit the nail on the head there.
And the surprising part about that, in a way, is that the payload capacity in this exact truck is, well, hang on, let's stop and actually verify before I say the wrong number. This particular truck is 1,462 pounds. So as we see in other Ford trucks, the payload number is actually pretty high for the segment. And even in this almost fully loaded trim, it's pretty close to that number, but the ride quality is still good.
I mean, you can feel that this is a unibody truck. I mean, you can tell that there's not much shaking and moving going on in the rear of the vehicle. It feels very solid in that regard, and I think you're not going to tell. You're not really going to notice that there is a bed back there.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's great to me.
Yeah. And the last half-ton trucks that we have tested here, whether they were a Ford truck or a Ram truck or a Chevy truck, almost all of them had payload ratings actually lower than the one that I'm driving right now. And in our cabin noise test, this was pretty average for a compact crossover as well. 72.5 decibels is what we got at 50 miles an hour. In terms of cabin noise, the one thing that I did notice is that Ford's pedestrian alert system, the sort of screaming angels underneath the hood, they are a little louder than some of the competition. And I don't know if that's sound deadening or it's just loud.
Well, compared to my mom's Toyota RAV4 hybrid, I think this is a little bit more noticeable than hers. However, from the outside, hers is pretty loud. So it depends on where you're sitting. But from in here, I don't feel like it's too intrusive. What you will hear more of, from my perspective, is that engine kicking in, that 2.5 liter. That when it does kick in, you will feel it and you will notice it. It's not.
Yeah,
the
there's a little
quietest.
bit more. And speaking of RAV4, that is a really interesting competitor, I think, to this because they're both hybrids. The RAV4 hybrid, of course, gets 40 mpg combined according to the EPA. This is 37, but over actually quite a lot of driving here. This is average 36.8 over the last 4,000 miles. So not just my driving or your driving, but the journalists before us. That's really close to the EPA score. And over my first 5 days of driving this, I was averaging 38.5, which I actually thought was below because in my head initially, I misremembered the EPA score and I thought, oh, it's rated for 40. So I'm a little bit disappointed because it's down there at 38.5. And then I actually reread the spec sheet, saw that it was 37, and I thought, well, I guess my opinion's actually changed. As long as you don't need all-wheel drive, and I would argue that a majority of shoppers don't necessarily need it. It's a nice to have, not a must-have in my opinion. And you don't need to tow over 2,000 pounds. This is one of the few no-compromises hybrids out there. I was really impressed by the highway fuel economy as well. I know you didn't get to spend quite as much time on the highway as I did, but the EPA highway rating is, not 37 mpg according to the EPA, but at 74 miles an hour with the cruise control set, we were averaging 38, and I think that's why our average fuel economy score ended up so high.
Yeah, and you can pretty much go about 500 miles on a road trip with this thing, and it's not going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to feel like you're riding in a brutal truck the entire time. That's something I think a lot of people will be surprised by if you take a test drive of these things. They're going to go in thinking it's going to be this sort of bumpy, jostly ride on the highway, and it's really not.
And it doesn't have that same sort of disconnected feel when the road's winding like this that you get in pretty much any other truck. Now let's take a deep dive into pricing and comparisons. As I said at the beginning of the video, the Maverick is very inexpensive for a new hybrid or for a new pickup truck in America. The MSRP before destination is just under $20,000. After destination, it's $21,490, so still definitely very affordable. Also interesting is that you can get either engine in any of the trims. It comes in XL, XLT, and Lariat at the moment. The body shape stays the same regardless of the trim level you get. You can get the 2-liter turbo for an extra $1,085, or you can get the 2-liter turbo and all-wheel drive for a little bit more than $3,000. That all-wheel drive system adds $2,220 to the 2-liter turbo. If you want to tow 4,000 pounds, you have to get all-wheel drive and you have to get the 2-liter turbo now. There was a little bit of confusion as to whether you could get that in the front-wheel drive model. It was made available initially with the Maverick. That is no longer the case. You have to get all-wheel drive at this time. That adds $745 and it comes with an integrated trailer brake controller. This is one of the lowest towing capacity vehicles in North America with an integrated trailer brake controller, but I absolutely love it. I think every vehicle that has any kind of towing in mind should have one of these right from the factory. And I would suggest if you're getting all-wheel drive in your Maverick, you might as well just add this package because it adds the upgraded cooling, the trailer brake controller, and it's a little bit quicker 0 to 60. So even if you're not interested in ever towing with it, you're going to get the upgraded cooling and faster 0 to 60 times. Bearing in mind that the prices on your screen are the base prices for each different trim level, if you get carried away with options on the Lariat, you'll end up right around $37,000. You may have seen some higher prices quoted on some websites. That includes all the dealer installed options that are available for the vehicle. I'm simply talking about right out of the factory, no drop-in bed liner, no tonneau cover, no cargo cover, things like that, just as it is when it exits Ford, about $37,000 tops. That is significantly less expensive than the average mid-size truck in America. In fact, all the way on up the line, it's going to be at least $5,000 less expensive than a Ford Ranger, about $6,000 less expensive than a Ford Escape, which is also an interesting twist, and $8,500 less than an Escape Hybrid. Before we move on, we should talk about availability because the Maverick ends up being a little bit more available than I had thought. A quick dealer search in my area yielded about 40 Mavericks available in the Bay Area right now, and they weren't simply the high-end trim with all-wheel drive and the 2-liter turbo. There were actually some base XL hybrid models available right for that $19,995 starting price plus, of course, destination. Now, I called those dealers, and two of the dealers, at least Fremont Ford and I believe it was Capital Ford, they were saying that they were going to sell them for MSRP, so no additional dealer markup. So if you were worried that you wouldn't be able to get your hands on an actual affordable near 40 mile per gallon pickup truck, it appears that it is possible. Now, I know that there are dealers in some areas that are putting huge markups on the Maverick. I would say if you're interested in one and you're worried about getting one for MSRP, now is the time to shop around. Just call all the dealers you can find, use the search tools available on the Ford website, and track one down. Now let's dive into the competition. At the moment, there is really only one direct competitor to the Maverick, and that would be the Hyundai Santa Cruz. The pricing of these two vehicles definitely has a lot of crossover, but the Santa Cruz is going to be more expensive. There's also no hybrid available. It starts at $24,140. No hybrid system in that base model, but you get higher payload and higher towing abilities. In fact, all the way on up the line, you're going to get more towing and more payload ability in the Santa Cruz. There was initially some reporting that the payload rating in the Santa Cruz wasn't able to be put in the bed. That actually is not correct. Hyundai has clarified that, and in the bed payload capacity is going to be higher in the Santa Cruz than it is in the Maverick. When confusion around the Santa Cruz payload figures started, Ford laughingly said, well, you could put all 1,500 pounds in the bed of the Maverick. Now, that's technically true. The problem is you couldn't drive the Maverick anywhere because remember, payload includes the driver and any passengers in the vehicle. So if you have 1,500 pounds of payload and you put a 200-pound driver in the vehicle, you've only got 1,300 pounds of payload left. And as always, payload is further reduced by the options you add to the vehicle. So if you add a lumber rack or you add some sort of cargo management system to the bed, the weight of those accessories takes away from your payload capacity. So keep that in mind. Towing ability is also a little bit higher in the Santa Cruz, but the bed is shorter. And that's because it's clear, I think, that Ford really wanted to make the Maverick a truck first. They wanted it to have a practical bed. There are definitely more cargo practical touches, I would say, in the back. The way the tailgate latches into place, the way that we have some tie downs there for larger items, the fact that Ford really was thinking about what happens if you want to carry larger pieces of plywood or larger things. It's definitely better sorted in the Maverick. And the Maverick's cargo area is actually square. And in the Santa Cruz, it actually leans down a little bit towards the front. It follows the curvature of the rear seat back. That gives you a bit more room in the cargo area, but it also means it's just not as square and is a little bit more unusual, I guess you could say. Now, Hyundai was really thinking about crossover shoppers. So on the inside, you'll have more legroom, more rear seat child room, more width across the interior, and the interior feels more premium. That's probably the biggest difference that you'll notice between these two vehicles when you hop inside. The dashboard has more soft touch components, more fabric components, nicer trim, etc. The infotainment system is more modern in the Santa Cruz. It feels snappier, it's more responsive. The one in the Maverick is a little bit laggy, and I did have to reset it once during the week. I've heard that that is a common problem. Remember that this is Sync 3, it's not Sync 4 or the next generation Sync that we should find in other Ford products soon. This is about one generation behind some of Ford's latest products. If you're interested in a turbocharged engine, the turbo in the Santa Cruz gives you more power, and it definitely has a sharper handling dynamic to it. If you're looking for fun to driveness, That would be the Santa Cruz. The Maverick ends up being a little bit more practical and a little bit more fuel efficient. If you plan on taking your small truck a little further off the beaten path on a regular basis, you might want to take a look at the Maverick. The dual clutch transmission that we have in the Hyundai is definitely sporty, and it definitely has a really great feel to it, but in extended off-road situations, it could overheat a little bit more easily, so definitely keep that in mind. Next up, we have the alternative that's hanging out right there on the dealer lot next to the Maverick, the Ford Escape. It's also available with the hybrid. You can get a 2-liter turbo in that model, but interestingly enough, any way you slice it, the Escape is going to be more expensive. It is a little bit roomier in the rear passenger compartment, and the plastics on the inside are definitely nicer. Also on the inside, you'll find features like a large LCD instrument cluster available, slightly more comfortable seats, a few more premium touches here and there. But I think the Maverick acquits itself very well, because even though the dashboard plastics aren't the most premium for $27,000 or $37,000, I think that Ford did a really, really good job styling the vehicle, and that's the same thing that we see in the Bronco Sport, also related to the Maverick and also related to the Ford Escape. The Bronco Sport has a lot of hard plastics inside, but they have interesting colors, interesting textures, and I think that Ford has done a good job having some soft touch points around the armrests and things like that you don't necessarily interact with the hard plastics regularly. And again, I think they've done a really good job styling it. For me, at least, between the Maverick and the Escape, or honestly any small crossover in America, whether that's a RAV4 or a Tucson, or even something like a Bronco Sport, I would simply get the Maverick. The combination of pickup truck-like practicality, the availability of locking cargo tops in the back, mean that this really does have the combination of small crossover practicality and truck practicality in one package, with oddly few compromises. The fuel economy was absolutely excellent. It was near what we see in the Toyota RAV4 hybrid, which is one of the best small crossovers when it comes to fuel economy. Really, my only complaint about the Maverick hybrid is that it doesn't have all-wheel drive, and I think that's something that Ford could fix if they wanted to. Ford apparently has been really shocked by the response for the Maverick hybrid. They expected it to sell well, but they didn't expect it to sell as well as it actually has been. And honestly, I'm surprised that Ford didn't think it would sell this well, because it is simply one of the best new vehicles on sale in America today. Almost 40 miles per gallon, small truck practicality, relatively easy to park, and the interior seating capacity of the average subcompact or compact crossover. What's not to love about the new Maverick? Be sure and let me know what you think about the new Maverick down there in the comment section below, and what would you cross-shop against the Maverick? Would you honestly consider a Maverick if you're shopping for a RAV4 or a CR-V or a Hyundai Tucson? Keep in mind, again, this is priced a little bit below actually many of those mainstream compact crossover options. Or would you be considering this as a value alternative to something like a Ford Ranger or a Chevy Colorado? Let me know that down there in the comment section below. Be sure and find me over at facebook.com/AlexNautos, Instagram, all those other social places, and of course, check out the merch store at awaymerch.com. I'll see all of you later.